Now, going on to the culture part of the podcast, you have Ben Shapiro versus Barbie, and social media ignites. Now, Ben Shapiro is the very famous conservative commentator. He's actually the co-CEO of the Daily Wire, one of the fastest growing conservative media companies headquartered out of Nashville, Tennessee. And they're probably best known for, their commentators. You got Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh. You also have Michael Knowles, comment section with Brett Cooper. Those probably, then Jeremy Boring's the co-CEO. People know him because of the razors and the chocolate. But they're pretty well known. They're actually seem to be growing exponentially. Now, Ben Shapiro did a whole 43-minute long critique of the film, which Barbie is actually rated PG-13, which kind of shows you kind of where they're tailoring the audience. And Ben's video is 43 minutes long, so it's quite detailed. And if you want, maybe we'll put some type of compilation together. We'll break down his breakdown or something funny like that. Let me know in the comments if that's something that sounds moderately interested. Now, it's interesting to note that the first critique actually came from a writer from the Daily Beast, Erin Gloria Ryan, who, I don't know why she's cheating. She's got 3 first names? That's fascinating. Most people have 1 first name, sometimes 2. That gets suspicious enough. But 3 first names? A little suspicious, to say the least. And it is hilariously cliche how she evaluates Ben. So her critique of his critique and him, and again, this isn't it's hilarious how she leans into the cliche. So it wasn't her first sentence, but like the third sentence of the whole thing, she said, quote, "Not to be sexist, but he doesn't look good. He looks tired, agitated, darty-eyed, even destroyed," unquote. So it is kind of hilarious. The very first thing she did critique was his appearance, which spot on in terms of cliche and critiquing. Before she looks into his content and his actual review of the movie or the points he's trying to make, she immediately just goes to, oh yeah, he's not styling. Now, some would say quite the opposite. Ben perhaps was styling for the movie. He actually dressed up as Ken to see the movie. I was a little disappointed he didn't dye his hair to go full, really get full into the Ryan Gosling character. But I know maybe he was pressed for time. Now, that video that Ben Shapiro produced, within 48 hours, it got 1.3 million views, which is astronomically successful for YouTube. Most videos are lucky to break 1,000 views. And actually, now that I think about it, don't forget to take 2 likes, subscribe, and comment, because obviously it helps the channel out. The more you share it, the more we can grow it together, the better we can increase the production quality. Now, when it comes to Ben's critique of the whole film, he mainly noted, or the quote that many people have taken away was his saying, quote, "angry feminist claptrap that alienates men from women," unquote. Which, yes, seems to be pretty true. Now, I did watch the whole 43-minute critique that Ben makes of the movie, and the whole film is basically that in a nutshell. It makes men look terrible, of course, and I don't know who's dumb enough at Mattel to greenlight this, but in the movie they make fun of Mattel and they call Mattel sexist. They implied that Mattel had a board of directors as all men, as old boys club. But if you take 2/8 of a second to actually Google the board of directors at Mattel, I believe it's a 5-6 or 6-5 split or breakdown of men versus women. So in terms of a board share, that's unprecedented, and you usually do not see that. Also, the CEO of Mattel for 30 years was a woman. She's actually one of the most famous. I believe she was the inventor and of many of the products lines there. So that kind of goes against logic, as most of the movie does. But throughout the whole movie, they make Ken, of course, look like half the movie was them talking about how much of a disadvantage it is to be a woman in modern society, which is not statistically correct in any way when you look at the breakdown of workforces and you look at all the benefits. So let's just think for 1/10 of a second. Who has a longer lifespan? Well, that's women. They certainly have a longer lifespan. Who spends less time in jail? Well, that's women. Who dies more in war? No, men do. So women have an advantage there. Yeah, they have a lot of advantages. But in the movie, of course, it's used completely. And also, it's perplexing to think who this movie is for. Now, I think Ben missed out in terms of his audience analysis. He noted that his critique was he thought it was mainly for moms with 8-year-old or 9-year-old children. I would think it's also for a lot of the aunts, too. The aunts who don't have kids, or maybe the gals who are just older and more feminist. But it's rated PG-13, so those kids shouldn't be going there. Granted, most parents don't do their jobs these days in terms of actually analyzing and critiquing media before putting it into their kids. An oversight that surely will cause society benefits, a cultural decline, I'm sure. But so it's those instances where kids nowadays, parents are dumb enough to just give them a smartphone, so they're just glued to that little smartphone most of their life. They're not really taking time to try to be creative or play with dolls like people did back in the day before the proliferation of all these technologies, which I would argue is also another thing, culturally speaking, it's not going to be good when they can't really socialize too much or don't really have any imagination. But time shall see how that further degrades society. But it's fascinating to see that. So Mattel greenlit this movie, which made Mattel itself look bad because in the movie they make Mattel look evil and trying to force Barbie back into the Barbie world where they didn't really do a great job communicating this, but she goes from the fake world to the real world. It's just a bizarre thing that it'll probably make a fair amount of money just because of the intellectual property. It's been a staple of culture for decades, but I don't see people repeat watching this film more than once. I don't think there's a rewatch factor where you gain more, or you actually learn more. There's more in-depth analysis every time. It's pretty surface level. There's not really much in-depth thinking. Granted, this is a Barbie movie. I don't expect much of it. And they also have a bunch of inappropriate jokes about masturbation, which again, parents are bringing their kids to this. That's not appropriate in any way. So it's one of those things where it's perplexing that they made the movie. It'll probably make a fair amount of money just because of intellectual property, but in terms of standing the test of time, like making a film that's going to really last generations and people really enjoy it, I suspect it's going to be just a flash pan or a single blip on the radar of cinema history. It's not going to be anything like The Matrix where you look at it 20, 30 years later and there's a lot of great reoccurring themes that kind of align with society. The CGI actually looked pretty darn impressive back then compared to now. That movie, I would argue, certainly would stand the test of time. I mean, also you could kind of tell the quality of the movie when the number of parodies seemingly never end because it's so good. There's a lot of parallels and they copy it, which some would argue is the best form of flattery. But that's just my 3 cents. Time shall tell to see. And let me know if you want to see a full in-depth analysis of the Barbie movie. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Each one of those things greatly helps out the channel. Trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of July. We got a couple days left, and I feel like we can do it. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers. Heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.